The digestive process begins in the oral cavity with mechanical and chemical digestion, meaning chewing and saliva, which prepares food for swallowing. The esophagus then uses peristalsis to move food bolus to stomach. Mechanical digestion in the oral cavity consists of the teeth and tongue breaking down food into smaller pieces, which is a process called mastication. Chemical digestion in the oral cavity is the saliva produced by the salivary glands. This moistens food and contains enzymes like amylase that begin starch digestion. Then we move into bolus formation, where the tongue manipulates food into a round mass ready for swallowing. The tongue pushes the bolus or food mass into the pharynx, which is a passageway for both air and food, initiating a swallowing reflex, with the epiglottis preventing food from entering the trachea. The esophagus, connecting the pharynx to the stomach, is the passageway for food and liquid. Waves of muscle contractions, which are peristalsis, propel food bolus down esophagus towards the stomach. There is the upper and lower sphincters. The upper esophageal sphincter controls the passage of food from the pharynx to the esophagus, while the lower esophageal sphincter, also called the gastroesophageal or cardiac sphincter, regulates the passage of food from the esophageal to the stomach and prevents backflow of stomach contents. The esophageal wall secretes mucus, which lubricates the esophagus and facilitates the passage of food. Overall, the oral cavity primary role is to break down food by your teeth, and the esophagus primary role is to transport food and liquids from oral cavity to the stomach.
After passing through the esophagus, food bolus will cause the gastroesophageal sphincter to open, and the food bolus will enter the stomach. The stomach includes the lesser omentum, which is present in the lesser curvature of the stomach. This attaches the stomach to the organ responsible for secreting bile, the liver. Bile is important in lipid digestion, and although the liver secretes the bile, it is the gallbladder that stores the bile. The stomach's process begins at the smallest portion of the stomach, the cardia. Next, the food bolus will travel to the dome portion part of the stomach, the fundus. Following that, food bolus will move to the body of the stomach, which is the largest section. In the body of the stomach, distension begins to stimulate acid secretion as well as stretch receptors in the gastric wall. Additionally, stomach distension also stimulates the gastrointrinsic reflex that stimulates motility and secretion in the small intestine, as well as the gastroileal reflex that stimulates relaxation of the ileocecal valve. Reflexes occurring in the body of the stomach activate the stomach's secretory cells that produce mixing waves. These waves churn food with gastric juices, breaking down the food further into a mixture called chyme. Each gastric pit in the fundus and body of the stomach will communicate with various gastric glands. These gastric glands are responsible for secreting most of the enzymes and acid involved in gastric digestion. These include perileal cells and chief cells. Perileal cells secrete intrinsic factor as well as hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid denatures proteins, breaks down cell walls of plant foods, and connective tissue in animal meat such as chicken. Hydrochloric acid also converts pepsinogen to pepsin, but it's the chief cells who are responsible for secreting the pepsinogen in the first place. As the process continues, it moves to the pyloric part of the stomach. The pyloric glands in the pyloric part of the stomach produce mucus secretions that consist of endoendocrine cells. These endoendocrine cells contain G cells that produce gastrin. Gastrin acts to stimulate the perileal cells and the chief cells. Endoendocrine cells also contain D cells that release somastasin. This inhibits the release of gastrin. The pyloric part of the stomach regulates the passage of chyme into the small intestine through the pyloric sphincter. Once chyme enters the small intestine, distension of the duodenum causes the enterogastric reflex to inhibit gastrin release and stimulate the pyloric sphincter. All in all, when ingested food meets the stomach, salivary amylase and lactase continue the digestion of carbohydrates and lipids. Some digestion of carbohydrates and lipids will occur in the stomach, but nutrients are not absorbed here. Ghrelin may have started the process that created the hunger sensations, but after eating, leptin will cause the feelings of satiety, both acting on the hypothalamus.
Once the food is digested and leaves the stomach, it enters the small intestines, which is a long, narrow
tube about 20 feet long, and it is divided into 3 sections: the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. The duodenum is where the chyme mixes with digestive juices from the pancreas. It contains enzymes like amylases for carbohydrates, proteases for proteins, and lipids for fats. The special sauces fats are swallowed by bowel, which helps them to be digested better. The chicken's proteins are broken down by proteases, and the bun and pickles carbohydrates are digested by amylases. The jejunum and ileum is the more digestive food. It moves through. The nutrients are absorbed into the bloodstream. The small intestine's inner lining has villi, which increases the surface area for absorption. The amino acids from the chicken, simple sugars from the bun and pickles, and fatty acids from the sauce are absorbed across the intestinal wall, entering the bloodstream to be transported throughout the body. Next is the large intestine. It's as passing through the small intestine, the remaining undigested food enters the large intestine or the colon. This is a much shorter but wider tube, about 5 feet long. It focuses on nutrients absorption to water absorption and waste elimination. So water absorption, the large intestine absorbs most of the remaining water from the food, which concentrates the waste forming feces. The bacteria activity, the large intestine is very important to bacteria. These bacteria ferment some of the remaining undigested carbohydrates producing gases. They also have to share to vitamin K synthesis. Then the formation of feces as water is absorbed. The waste food compacts into feces. They consist of indigestive substances, dead bacteria, and other waste food. And then the elimination, the feces are stored in the rectum until they are eliminated from the body through the anus during defecation.
The digestive system breaks down food, absorbs nutrients, and eliminates waste. Let's quickly follow the journey from the esophagus until elimination. After swallowing, food moves down the esophagus through peristalsis, a series of muscle contraction. It enters to the stomach, where acids and enzyme breaks it down into a liquid called chyme. The chyme moves into small intestine, where bile from the liver and enzyme from the pancreas help break it down further. Nutrients are absorbed into the bloodstream through the intestinal walls. The remaining materials enter the large intestines, where water is absorbed and bacteria help break down any remaining nutrients. What's left become waste and moves toward the rectum. The rectum stretches as it fills, triggers two reflexes. The intrinsic myocentric reflex stimulates peristalsis, pushing waste forward, while the parasympathetic reflex enhances the movement and relaxes the internal and the sphincter. Finally, the external and the sphincter must be voluntarily relaxed to complete elimination. In summary, the food travels from the esophagus to the stomach, then the small and large intestines, and finally waste exit through the rectum, and that's the digestive process.